What if the very traits people criticize, fear, or reject in you are the same traits that prove you were never meant to live an ordinary life? What if your toxicity isn't corruption, but unrefined power? And what if suppressing these traits has been slowly destroying you from the inside? Stay with me, because by the end of this video, you may finally understand why you've always felt different and why it was never a mistake. You were never misunderstood by accident. You were misunderstood because the world is built to reward what is quiet, compliant, predictable, and easy to control, and you were never any of those things. From early on, people didn't know where to place you. You felt it in their reactions, in their labels, in the way they tried to reduce you to something simpler, too intense, too distant, too difficult, too much. They called your traits toxic because they couldn't manage them, not because they were wrong. A controlled world always fears what it cannot tame. What most people fail to understand is this: the traits they criticize in you were never flaws. They were dark gifts. Raw, unrefined forces designed for survival, leadership, and spiritual authority. Qualities meant to operate in pressure, not comfort. Power meant to withstand chaos, not blend into routines. But here is the truth most never hear. When these gifts are misunderstood, when they are untrained, when they are forced into environments that demand obedience instead of purpose, they don't disappear. They turn inward, they create tension, they create conflict, and that is when the world starts calling you the problem. This is not a video to excuse harmful behavior, and it is not here to glorify destruction. This is a revelation, a line being drawn between what is truly toxic and what is simply powerful without guidance. Because there is a difference between being dangerous and being undisciplined, and chosen ones are often punished for carrying abilities they were never taught how to wield. If you see yourself in these traits, listen closely. This message is not here to shame you. It is here to wake you up, to show you why you never fit, why you never blended in, and why suppressing who you are has cost you more than you realize. What you are about to hear may challenge how you see yourself, and it may explain struggles you've never been able to put into words. If this already resonates, pause for a moment. Like this video, subscribe if you haven't yet, and comment 99. Not as a number, but as a signal. In spiritual language, 9 represents completion and awakening. Double 9 marks the end of an old cycle and the activation of a higher one. By commenting it, you're not agreeing with me. You're declaring that you're ready to understand yourself at a deeper level. And now, let's go where most people are too afraid to look. Emotional detachment is one of the most misunderstood traits carried by chosen ones, because from the outside it looks like absence, when in reality it is containment. You did not shut down because you don't feel. You shut down because you feel too much, too fast, and too deeply for a world that mishandles emotional truth. Early on, you learned that openness came at a cost. Each time you trusted, something was taken. Each time you softened, something was used against you. Betrayal didn't just hurt you once, it educated you. Rejection didn't simply wound you, it trained you. And misunderstanding didn't confuse you, it taught you a brutal lesson. Feeling freely in the wrong environment is dangerous. So your system adapted, not by becoming numb, but by becoming selective. What most people never see is that your detachment is not indifference. It is a shield built after too many emotional ambushes. You learned to pull your energy inward, not because you stopped caring, but because you realized not everyone deserves access to your inner world. And while others externalize pain, collapse publicly, or bleed emotionally in unsafe spaces, you internalized control, you mastered silence. You learned how to observe without reacting, how to absorb emotional impact without exploding. That is why, when chaos erupts, you don't flinch. While others spiral, you steady. While emotions flood the room, you become still. This is where the misunderstanding begins. People interpret your calm as coldness, your restraint as lack of empathy, your silence as absence of feeling. They assume that because you don't react loudly, you don't care deeply. But the truth is the opposite. You care so deeply that you refuse to let your emotions be weaponized again. You have seen what happens when you give unfiltered access to your heart. You have watched people misuse your vulnerability, twist your honesty, and take advantage of your depth. Detachment became your way of staying functional in a world that feeds on emotional leakage. And here's the part almost no one talks about. This trait is not a flaw, it is a battlefield skill. Emotional detachment allows you to stay rational when pressure peaks. It allows you to think clearly when others are hijacked by fear, anger, or panic. It allows you to see situations as they are, not as emotions distort them. That is why you are often the one others secretly rely on during crisis. Not because you are heartless, but because you are stable. You don't crumble when emotions surge. You don't collapse when tension rises. You remain present, precise, and aware. But this gift comes with a warning. When emotional detachment goes unrecognized, it can isolate you. When it goes untrained, it can harden you. The same shield that protects you can also prevent intimacy if left unchecked. And this is where the tension begins to build, because what you carry is not meant to disappear, but to evolve. Detachment is only the first layer. Beneath it lies something far more powerful, something that explains why you sense danger before it appears and why you pull back before collapse happens. And once you recognize that pattern, you'll start to see that this trait was preparing you for something much bigger than survival. Extreme self-reliance in chosen ones does not come from confidence. It comes from clarity. A moment, often early in life, when you realize something most people spend decades avoiding. Help was conditional. Support was inconsistent. Rescue was a promise rarely kept. You didn't become independent because it felt empowering. You became independent because waiting hurt more than acting. At some point, you understood that if something was going to be fixed, moved, carried, or survived, it would be done by you. Not because you wanted to be alone, but because no one else arrived. This realization rewired you. While others learned to lean, you learned to stand. While others trusted systems, families, or safety nets, you learned to calculate risk and responsibility internally. You stopped asking for permission. You stopped asking for help. Not out of pride, but out of pattern recognition. Every disappointment sharpened this instinct. Every broken promise confirmed it. Every moment you were left to figure things out alone became proof that dependence was a liability. So you built your life differently. You carry your own weight. You manage your own crises. You absorb pressure silently and keep moving. From the outside, this is deeply misunderstood. People don't see survival intelligence. They see resistance. They don't see adaptation. They see stubbornness. They interpret your refusal to lean as arrogance, your silence as emotional distance, your independence as a rejection of others. But they don't see the cost that created this trait. They don't see the nights you learned to self-soothe, the decisions you made without guidance, the moments you had to be both the problem solver and the emotional anchor. You didn't close yourself off. You simply stopped expecting what was never reliable. Here is what makes this trait dangerous and powerful at the same time. Extreme self-reliance for a chosen one creates a nervous system trained for survival under pressure. You adapt faster because you have to. You recover quicker because there is no one to fall back on. When situations collapse, you don't freeze waiting for instruction. You move, you assess, you act. This is why you often succeed in environments where others break down. While they search for support, you build solutions. While they wait for permission, you create momentum. But there is a shadow to this gift. When self-reliance becomes identity instead of skill, it isolates you. It convinces you that needing others is weakness, when in truth it is alignment that matters, not dependence. And this is where the tension tightens. Because the same strength that allowed you to survive alone was never meant to keep you alone forever. It was meant to prepare you for something heavier, something that requires discernment, not isolation. And as this unfolds, another trait begins to surface, one that explains why your presence alone shifts dynamics, attracts resistance, and makes people uncomfortable before you ever speak. There is a reason rooms change when you enter them, even when you say nothing. It isn't imagination, and it isn't coincidence. Chosen ones carry a presence that doesn't ask for permission. You don't need volume to be felt. You don't need dominance to be noticed. Your energy arrives before your words do, and it immediately disrupts whatever is false, insecure, or performative in the space. Conversations slow down. Laughter tightens. Certain people become uneasy without knowing why. That reaction has never been about you personally. It has always been about what you reveal simply by existing. Your presence exposes what people work hard to hide. Insecurity becomes louder. False confidence starts to crack. Authority that was built on titles instead of substance feels threatened. You don't attack these things. You don't even point at them. They surface on their own because your energy operates at a level that doesn't tolerate masks. And when truth begins to rise, discomfort follows. Not because you are aggressive, but because you are real in environments built on performance. This is where the misunderstanding begins. People label you arrogant because you don't seek approval. They call you aggressive because you don't shrink. They say you're too intense because your presence forces them to confront parts of themselves they'd rather ignore. But intensity is not hostility, depth is not dominance, and silence is not superiority. You are not trying to intimidate anyone. You simply refuse to dilute yourself to make others feel safe in their illusions. What most never realize is that this trait is a natural form of leadership. You command respect without demanding it. You don't need to announce authority because it is felt. That's why some people instinctively listen when you speak, and others resist before you ever do. You see through manipulation because your nervous system reads inconsistencies instantly. You sense when words don't match intention. You feel when power is performative instead of earned. And because you don't play along, truth becomes unavoidable in your presence. This gift is dangerous to those who rely on deception. It dismantles false hierarchies. It destabilizes environments built on image rather than integrity. That is why you've often been singled out, misunderstood, or quietly opposed. Not because you did something wrong, but because your presence alone shifted the balance. You didn't break the illusion, you revealed it. And here is the deeper tension. When this trait goes unrecognized, it can isolate you. When it goes untrained, it can harden you. But when it is understood, it becomes one of the most powerful tools a chosen one can carry. Because a presence that forces truth to surface is never accidental. It is preparation. And as this awareness sharpens, another pattern begins to emerge. One that explains why you feel the need to control environments before they collapse, and why chaos bothers you more than it does most people. Control issues in chosen ones are rarely about power, they are about prevention. Long before others sense instability, you feel it forming beneath the surface. You notice subtle shifts in tone, energy, timing, behavior. You read patterns the way others read words, and once you've seen how quickly one small misalignment can trigger collapse, your instinct is not to wait, it is to intervene. Not loudly, not dramatically, but deliberately. You adjust, manage, redirect, and stabilize before chaos has a chance to announce itself. This hyper-awareness didn't appear randomly, it was built through exposure. You have witnessed situations unravel when no one was paying attention. You've seen relationships rot because warning signs were ignored. You've watched systems fail because people assumed everything would somehow fix itself. That kind of experience leaves a mark. It teaches you that disorder doesn't arrive suddenly, it accumulates quietly, and because you recognize the early signals, you feel responsible for stopping the damage before it spreads. From the outside, this looks controlling. People say you're rigid, dominant, or unwilling to let things flow. They accuse you of needing things your way, but they mistake vigilance for ego. What they don't understand is that you are not trying to dominate outcomes. You are trying to prevent avoidable destruction. You don't seek control for comfort. You seek it for stability. And when others move carelessly, your system reacts because you know the cost of negligence. This trait reveals itself most strongly in relationships. You sense when dynamics are shifting, when boundaries are eroding, when intentions no longer align with words. Instead of waiting for proof, you tighten structure, you set rules, you attempt to guide the outcome, not because you want power over others, but because you are wired to protect what matters. You would rather be misunderstood as controlling than be proven right after everything falls apart. The hidden gift beneath this trait is strategic intelligence. You think several steps ahead. You anticipate consequences before actions are taken. You see where paths lead, even when others are focused only on the present moment. This is why you are often calm during emergencies and restless during peace. Your mind is constantly scanning for weak points, not out of fear, but out of responsibility. You are not built to dominate environments. You are built to safeguard them. But here is where tension sharpens. When this gift goes untrained, it can turn into exhaustion. When it goes unrecognized, it can isolate you. Because carrying the weight of foresight without shared responsibility is heavy. And as this pattern deepens, another behavior begins to surface. One that explains why you sometimes disappear without warning, retreat without explanation, and reset your life while others are still catching up. There is a moment that repeats itself throughout your life, a moment others never understand until it is already gone. One day you are present, engaged, contributing, holding things together, and then suddenly you're not. No announcement, no dramatic goodbye. You withdraw, you disappear. From relationships, from groups, from routines, sometimes from entire versions of your life. To those watching from the outside, it looks abrupt, cold, even cruel. They say you ghost. They say you detach. They say you run away when things get hard. But that interpretation only exists because they don't feel what you feel when alignment breaks. For a chosen one, withdrawal is not avoidance. It is a reset mechanism. Your system knows when energy has been depleted past the point of recovery. You sense when a space, a connection, or a phase has quietly turned against your growth. Long before conflict becomes visible, your body registers the shift. Motivation fades. Clarity dulls. Presence feels heavy instead of grounding. And when that threshold is crossed, staying becomes more damaging than leaving. You don't disappear because you're afraid to face things. You disappear because staying any longer would cost you something essential. What others don't realize is that you never leave impulsively. You observe longer than they think. You try longer than they see. You carry the weight silently, hoping alignment will return. But once your inner signal locks in, there is no negotiation. You pull back completely, not out of anger, not out of punishment, but out of instinctive self-preservation. You understand something most people resist. Not everything is meant to be fixed. Some things are meant to be released without explanation. This is why the misunderstanding cuts so deeply. People assume your disappearance invalidates what was shared. They believe your silence erases connection. But in truth, you don't vanish lightly. You vanish because you respect your energy too much to keep pouring it into spaces that no longer recognize its value. You don't cling. You don't beg. You don't force continuity where alignment has expired. And in a world addicted to attachment, that looks threatening. The hidden gift beneath this trait is rare discernment. You know when something is no longer aligned, even if it still looks fine on the surface. You feel when growth has stalled. You sense when your presence is being tolerated instead of honored. And instead of slowly dying in places that drain you, you choose disappearance over decay. That choice saves your spirit again and again, even when it costs you relationships that were never meant to follow you forward. But here is the tension most people miss. Every disappearance marks the end of one version of you and prepares the ground for another. And if you pay attention to the pattern, you'll realize something unsettling. Each time you withdraw, you don't return smaller. You return clearer, stronger, more precise, which raises a question that leads us into the next truth. If you are not meant to cling, conform, or remain where your soul is shrinking, then what exactly are you being prepared for next? There is a voice inside you that rarely rests. It watches, measures, questions, refines. It doesn't congratulate easily. It doesn't allow complacency. And no matter how much you accomplish, it quietly asks, is this really all you're capable of? For a chosen one, this voice is not cruelty. It is calibration. You are not driven by external pressure alone. You are driven by an internal standard that feels impossibly high because it was never meant to be ordinary. You sense, deep down, that there is more in you than what has been expressed so far, and that awareness becomes fuel and friction at the same time. This relentless self-criticism is often mistaken for negativity. Others think you are too hard on yourself, that you can never be satisfied, that you don't know how to appreciate what you have. They see you refining, correcting, revisiting, and they assume you are unhappy. But they don't understand the source of that pressure. You are not chasing approval, you are responding to potential. When you glimpse what you could become, comfort starts to feel like betrayal. Settling feels heavier than striving, and silence from that inner voice would feel like something essential had gone missing. What most people never realize is that this trait was forged the moment you became aware of your own capacity. Once you sense depth within yourself, mediocrity becomes unbearable. You don't criticize because you hate yourself. You critique because you refuse to abandon the version of you that keeps calling forward. That inner voice pushes you to refine your character, your skills, your discipline, your integrity. It doesn't allow stagnation because stagnation would slowly suffocate your purpose. This is why praise alone never satisfies you. Compliments don't quiet the voice. Comfort doesn't either. Only alignment does. Only growth does. Only movement towards something meaningful brings relief. And while others chase ease, you chase evolution. You don't stay where things are good enough. You stay where things are becoming something greater. That is why your path often looks harder. That is why rest feels complicated. That is why your inner world feels intense, even during success. The hidden gift beneath this trait is constant evolution. You don't repeat cycles unconsciously for long. You analyze, adjust, and improve. You don't settle for surface-level change. You rebuild from the inside out. And while this can feel exhausting, it is also what keeps you advancing while others plateau. You are not driven by comfort. You are driven by purpose. And purpose, when ignored, becomes pressure. But here is the tension that tightens as this trait matures. When self-criticism sharpens without balance, it can turn inward instead of forward. And when that happens, something else emerges. Something that explains why you react so strongly to disrespect, and why certain lines, once crossed, can never be uncrossed again. There is a line inside you that does not bend, it does not negotiate, and once it is crossed, something in you changes instantly. For chosen ones, disrespect is not a minor offense. It is a signal. You react strongly not because you are emotional, but because your system detects violation at a deep level. Manipulation, dishonesty, passive aggression, subtle power games, half-truths, shifting narratives, even disguised jokes meant to diminish you, all trigger the same internal response. Something is wrong here. Something is out of alignment. What confuses people is the speed of your reaction. One moment everything seems fine, the next a boundary appears, or a door closes completely. No long explanations, no negotiation, sometimes no second chance. From the outside, this looks extreme. They say you overreact. They say you take things too personally. They accuse you of being sensitive or dramatic. But they don't understand that what you are responding to is not the surface behavior. It is the intention beneath it. You don't react to words alone. You react to energy, motive, and pattern. Chosen ones are exceptionally sensitive to disrespect because disrespect is rarely isolated. It is usually the beginning of erosion. You have learned that small violations, if tolerated, grow into larger ones. Silence becomes permission. Tolerance becomes normalization. And once disrespect is normalized, your authority, your boundaries, and your sense of self begin to dissolve slowly. You have seen this happen before, so now you stop it early, decisively, even if it costs you relationships, even if it makes you look harsh. This is why your cutoffs can feel explosive to others. They didn't see the accumulation. They didn't notice the subtle manipulations, the quiet dismissals, the shifting respect. You did. You felt every inch of it. And when the final line was crossed, you didn't explode out of impulse. You responded out of clarity. You chose distance over self-betrayal. You chose truth over harmony. The hidden gift beneath this trait is spiritual authority. You protect the integrity of your inner space. You refuse to train others to treat you poorly just to keep peace. You value truth more than approval, alignment more than belonging. And while this makes your path lonelier at times, it also keeps it clean. You don't carry relationships built on compromise of self. You don't stay where dishonesty is rewarded. You don't lower your standards to be liked. But here is where the tension sharpens even further, because when someone consistently refuses disrespect, they don't just set boundaries, they become a mirror, and mirrors make people uncomfortable, which explains why, even when you are quiet, even when you are minding your own business, conflict still seems to find you. And that leads directly into the final trait, the one that reveals why your very existence provokes reaction, resistance, and transformation in others, whether you intend it or not. There is a pattern that has followed you your entire life, whether you noticed it consciously or not. Conflict finds you even when you are not looking for it. You can be quiet, you can be focused, you can be minding your own path, and still, tension emerges around you. Jealousy surfaces without invitation. Resistance forms without explanation. People project narratives onto you that you never spoke, intentions you never carried, motives you never had. From the outside, it looks like chaos follows you. From the inside, it feels confusing, unfair, and exhausting. But here is the truth, most never uncover. You do not attract conflict because you create it. You attract it because your existence disrupts comfort zones. Your presence highlights contrast. When you walk into a room, people unconsciously measure themselves. When you live authentically, others are reminded of where they are compromised. When you refuse to perform, conform, or diminish yourself, unresolved insecurity in others looks for somewhere to land. And often, it lands on you. This is where misunderstanding takes root. People accuse you of drama because conflict happens around you. They assume you must be the common denominator. They label you a troublemaker, a lightning rod, someone who always has issues. But they don't see what's actually happening beneath the surface. You are not causing storms. You are exposing pressure systems that already existed. You don't provoke insecurity, you reveal it. And revelation is uncomfortable for those who prefer denial. Chosen ones are catalysts by nature. You accelerate processes simply by being present. Hidden motives surface faster. Weak foundations crack sooner. False dynamics collapse more quickly. This is why some people feel inspired by you, while others feel threatened. The same energy that awakens one person destabilizes another. And because many are not ready to face what rises within them, they project it outward, toward you. The hidden gift beneath this trait is immense. Your life triggers awakening, exposure, and transformation, whether you intend it or not. You bring things to the surface that would otherwise remain buried. You shorten timelines. You force honesty. And while this makes your journey turbulent at times, it also makes it meaningful. You are not here to maintain comfort. You are here to initiate change. But here is where everything converges. When you combine emotional restraint, self-reliance, presence, control, withdrawal, self-refinement, intolerance for disrespect, and this catalytic nature, a final realization becomes unavoidable. These traits were never meant to remain dark, scattered, or misunderstood. They were meant to be integrated, and once they are, everything about how you see yourself and how you move through the world begins to shift. And that is exactly where this story must now end and truly begin. Everything you felt while listening to this was not random. The tension, the recognition, the discomfort mixed with relief. This was not information, this was alignment, because the traits you've been carrying were never meant to destroy you or anyone else. They were never signs that something was wrong with you. They were signs that something powerful was forming without instruction. Raw force without guidance always looks dangerous. Untamed fire burns everything around it. Not because fire is evil, but because it hasn't been trained to serve a purpose. What you've been called toxic was never corruption. It was intensity without direction, awareness without mentorship, power without permission. Untrained, these traits damage relationships. Unconscious, they isolate you. Misunderstood, they turn inward and create pressure, loneliness, and doubt. But once aligned, once disciplined, once integrated, they stop working against you and start working through you. And that is when everything changes. Because a trained, chosen one is not loud, not chaotic, not destructive. They are precise, grounded, unshakable. This is the revelation most never reach. You were never broken. You were never cursed. You were carrying gifts that required maturity, not suppression. And the pain you endured was not proof of failure. It was training. Every betrayal refined discernment. Every isolation strengthened authority. Every misunderstanding forced you to know yourself instead of borrowing identity from others. You were not delayed. You were being forged. Now comes the moment of decision. Awareness without action becomes regret. Recognition without ownership fades. So if this message described you in ways no one ever has before, comment, "I am chosen." Not to be seen, not to be validated, but to declare that you accept the weight and the responsibility of who you are becoming. Because once you stop fighting who you are, once you stop apologizing for your depth, once you stop shrinking what was meant to stand tall, something shifts quietly but permanently. You don't chase alignment anymore. It finds you. You don't force doors anymore. They open. You don't explain yourself anymore. Your presence speaks. And from that moment on, everything starts working in your favor.